Well, Dan Dagget is our next speaker. Dan, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute, pull up your presentation, we'll get you front and center here. We're grateful that you're able to be here with us, Dan. It's like, there
Okay,
we
there
are.
we are. And let's see, one more click and uh, well, uh, I'm learning a little bit now. As I look at my screen, I have a menu at the top that covers up some of my words. But anyway, I think here we'll start off with this is a slide of some of our. Wait a minute, what?
Where are you calling from?
I'm from here. Well, my wife just said, "Tell them where I'm calling from."
Oh,
Arizona.
perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
down in Arizona. Yeah, just down off the mountains at the beginning of the desert, right outside my window is Dry Creek, and it's very dry right now. I'd like to change that. But
Okay.
anyway, I'm an environmentalist, which we'll find out about in just a little bit. This is a picture of us out looking at some range lands over near in the area of Prescott. And as I was researching information for this particular presentation, I ran across a website called Science Alert. And, why rejoining nature via regenerative agriculture is so valuable for all generations. Well, a Science Alert said when people feel they are enmeshed with nature, they are not only greener in their behavior, but they tend to be happier. There you go. So sciencealert.com, the guy wrote it, said absolutely he wants his kids to grow up feeling they're part of nature. And I think we'd all like to be part of nature. I know when I first moved west in 1980, the picture there on the left, me and my wife and a nephew-in-law, I said I wanted to feel I was enmeshed with nature, so I immediately became involved in environmental groups' efforts to keep the West wild and wonderful. And that's the perspective that I'm speaking from. I'm not a producer, I'm not a rancher, I'm an environmentalist. And when I was, after I was, Atlantic Monthly wrote about me as an unlikely defender of the cowboy because I had been a relentless environmental advocate organizing demonstrations for, of all things, Earth First and similar groups. And I received an Environmental Hero Award as one of the top 100 grassroots environmental activists in America by the Sierra Club for his John Muir Centennial celebration in 1992. And that was based on my work to limit the open ended character of predator control programs directed at mountain lions and black bears by, among other people, Arizona ranchers. So well, that's the issue that I first started meeting with ranchers about. And some of those first meetings, it's the picture of one of them, were a bit contentious, as you can see by the looks of things here. The guy pointing to himself is a government agent, and there's other enviros and ranchers there. And but when we were contentious, but then the thing that surprised us is when the ranchers and enviros started talking back and forth, we found out that in the West, we want, in most cases, the same things. Those of us, ranchers, enviros, recreationists, and even government agents want the same things. What do we want? Well, we want healthy ecosystems and healthy grasslands, stable and diverse wildlife populations, healthy flowing streams, less erosion, less desertification, fewer wildfires, and less climate change. There you go. So we started comparing land that was being grazed in ways intended to achieve our shared goals. The ranchers started taking us out and saying, look at how we're trying to achieve the things we're talking about as our shared goals. And one of the places we visit, here's a picture of it, one of the first visits we did, a regeneratively grazed ranch in southern Arizona by one of the first really active applicants of the savory method, holistic grazing. And then we compared that with the land right across the fence that had been protected from grazing, supposedly to achieve the same goals that we just listed. And this is protected land, as I said, right across the fence from the previous photos taken same day. So what happens to land when ranching's removed? Well, here's a place not too far from where I live. And this used to be a ranch for sure. As you can see, it's a big division, a city and a grassland. So here's something else that we don't think about, or a lot of people don't know happens when we remove grazing to supposedly achieve eco goals and make the land healthier ecologically. This is a U.S. forest study area that is over near, well, it's pretty near that city you just saw. And grazing was here. Well, let's see. Grazing was removed from this forest study plot in 1946, and this photo was taken in 2005. And they removed it, I think, to show the ranchers exactly how healthy the land would be if they'd get their cows off. Well, the cows are off, and this is 2005 after 1946, and you can see how well it's doing. Here's a more recent picture, 2014. And well, as I asked the question here, how well did this achieve the shared goals of ranchers, enviros, recreationists, and government agencies? Is this a healthy ecosystem, a healthy grassland? It's in a grassland area for sure. Do you think it's supporting stable and diverse wildlife populations? How about desertification? Is it reduced desertification? Has it been returned to nature? Well, let's just step outside the fence of this study area. And look, there we are, right outside the fence. You can see the sign for the study area and the arrow pointing to it. This photo was taken the same day as the last one. This is not very far away, as I say, one fence line away. And so it's shared goals achieved, I would say, because what we're looking at here is healthy. This looks like a pretty healthy ecosystem, certainly a healthy grassland. And this is actually the area where the first photo you saw of all of us standing out there monitoring was just right across the road from this. Stable and diverse wildlife populations. Well, I believe this supports wildlife and certainly not as desertified. And well, you could say it's returned to natural function, the natural functions that we've been talking about with cover crops and things like that, because what we're looking at here is a cover crop of grass. And it's actually been created by regenerative grazing. So, what about climate change? That's one of the biggest issues that we see and hear so much about on the media these days. How's this doing for climate change? Let's compare the two on that too. So, climate change, the area that you're looking at, the grassland, is 78 degrees, and these temperatures were taken within a few minutes of each other. And inside the study area on the barren land, it's 122 degrees, 44 degrees hotter. So it seemed to me as an environmentalist, and I think about it as we remove more and more grazing from more and more of the areas here in the West, and it seems like we're changing, and we're going to see more examples of it, more and more of grassland into this barren land here. Maybe I'm beginning to think that's one of the major contributors to the problem of climate change. So, and then when I started going on these field trips with these ranchers, I began to realize that regenerative ranching, or as they called it, holistic management at the time, or bison mimicry, is really a way to work in partnership. What we're doing is we're working nature. In other words, we're rejoining nature. And that's beginning to think that's a good way to talk about it and think about it and to feel good about it. Because however, there was a thing when you are talking about rejoining nature by putting animals on it. The standard definition of nature is all the animals, plants, rocks, etc. in the world, and all the features, forces, and processes that happen or exist independently of people. So if people are doing it, it's unnatural, so according to the definitions. But wait a minute. Here's some Native American rock art affirming the fact that early inhabitants of the Americas did work in partnership with nature by herding bison, elk, and other hoof grazing animals. Doing so, they sustained the Great Plains and the grasslands and stuff of Arizona. A friend of mine used to be one of the top bison scientists in the world, and people would say to him, "Wait a minute, there didn't used to be bison in Arizona," and he'd say, "Wait a minute, how many bones you want to see? How soon you want to see them? Today?" And so to show you the herders here, I put headdresses on the Indians that are included in the petroglyph. But and as I point out, here we're doing the same mutualism. We're using it today. That same mutualism is in action today, and sustaining ecosystems via mutually beneficial relationships, like we're seeing here, the cowboys herding cows instead of bison, instead of Indians herding bison. Humans are as much a part of nature as other animals and plants too. So if we're, I'm not trying to say that nature's message is that grazing is good for the environment, period. I've seen enough unimpressively grazed land to make that clear. And here's a picture of some fairly unimpressive land that's obviously been grazed. But as I've read more and more about this, I'm finding scientists who have cited the value of evolved mutualistic relationships by which species interact in ways that each provides a benefit to the other. In other words, what they seem to me is they're thinking about nature and interpreting it and actually recognizing it in terms as a matter of synergy and relating to it in that way instead of just scarcity. In other words, doing less doesn't mean that you're always going to get more. Because one of the things that, one of these writers, Peter Corning, in his book Nature's Magic, written is without the benefits of mutualism, one or even both of the interacting species can be diminished or may even cease to exist. Wait a minute, I've got to add another species here to my list of mutualistics. The cow right next to the bison down there. So without the benefits of mutualism, one or more of the interactive species can be reduced or cease to exist. Really? Well, let's look at an example. Here is another Forest Service study plot near my home in Sedona. This is while it's being grazed and monitored. As you can see, the monitoring thing included there, the 1 yard square. In 1963, well, grazing was removed in the 1980s, and here we're going to see what happened. Here we go. So there is in 2016 when I first found about it. That's how we can move the monitoring square down there and see the grass plants have gone. And take a look to the left, and you're going to see get a better idea of how much this has changed since mutualism has been diminished. There you go. And talk about climate change. We were talking about that. I went out here the other day, and I haven't included the photo in the presentation yet. But I took my little surface thermometer out there and measured this area to see what it was, and it was 140 degrees. At the time, I couldn't compare that to any well-managed grasslands around because there aren't any near here because grazing has been removed from a really, well, a lot of huge areas in the West and a huge area around here. And then, well, what that seemed to me is nature is telling us something. It's telling us that actually is. Mutualism ended, one or more of the interacting species actually was reduced, and some may have ceased to exist. Not surprisingly, here's another one. This is just upstream a little bit of that area, grazing removed here, and you see how the water course through the drainage, the main water course, has deteriorated even more. And this will give you some idea of how the erosion has happened. Now, we've been hearing a lot about how when you remove cover plants, covering not necessarily crops, but just plant systems that cover areas. When you remove the plant coverage, the erosion starts. Well, it sure has started here. And here's more testimony, here's opposite testimony from nature about let's see, restoring mutualism. It's about what effects we can have by restoring mutualism rather than ending it. This is well, you can see we've been having, the erosion is starting pretty good here. We're having ORV trails and all that sort of stuff. This is a ranch that was owned by a friend of mine who's no longer with us, unfortunately. And he was just getting into applying regenerative grazing. He looked at this and said, let's try something here. So we did. We put the critter, did a little bit of rocks, didn't need the rocks, turns out, we'll see in a minute, and put animals on it, fed them, and had them stomp it in and stomp in the seeds and took them off and let it recover. And this is 1 year later, that's the result. That's there you go. Erosion is diminished there, you betcha, and probably climate change diminished as well. And I'm sure there are critters coming back and saying, boy, this looks a lot better habitat than it did before. Well, and here's one of our workers saying, what are we waiting for? Why aren't we doing more of this? But what about the surge of wildfires? So that's a real problem we're having around here. I've been weed whacking across Dry Creek to keep my house from being in danger. And can we partner with nature to help mitigate the wildfire danger? And this is from my book, the book that is the gift that I've only got a few of them, but I can give one to as a gift to 1, 2, and 3 callers. Notice where this fire stopped. You can see the area where it stopped. The area that didn't burn was grazed in a manner to make it vital, green growing, and therefore less flammable. And here's some more examples. You see the grazed didn't burn, the house is still there. Ungrazed burned, the houses burned too. And some other areas where the fire burned right up to the fence, the ungrazed burned and the grazed didn't burn. And even where the fence is really irregular, it stopped the fire. So regenerative grazing can not only reduce wildfire danger, it can reverse some of the severe damage wildfire causes. So here we're looking at a mountainside up by Flagstaff where I used to live, actually right above my neighborhood that I used to live in. And I'm glad I had left it when this happened, because we're going to see rain that falls on fire denuded slopes rushes downhill, and it bears lots of soil, ash, and litter. And this is pretty close to where I used to live, flooding neighborhoods and communities like Flagstaff. You can see what it did to the cars down there and carried in all that mud, made quite a mess. And well, how about can rejoining nature mitigate some of that kind of damage? This is land near Grand Junction, Colorado. It was burned by a large wildfire 4 years before this photo was taken by a fellow who was really into applying regenerative, restorative grazing, Terry Wheeler. And Terry brought me these photos. We'll see some more of Terry's work in a minute. He used a flock of sheep to regenerate the land. There is regeneration workers, and they stomped in the seeds and mulch from the hay that he and his workers provided. And they, of course, they added a little fertilizer of their own. And here's the result. After 1 year's worth of results, green and growing, sequestering carbon, resisting erosion, and recovering from habitat loss. And compare that with 4 years of leave it alone restoration. So, well, bringing us to Terry's work here, this is probably one of the most impressive ecosystem restorations on planet Earth. At least it's the most impressive one that I know about. It's near a town called Globe here in Arizona. And I say that brings us to one of the most eye-opening restorations ever that affirms regenerative grazing really is partnering with nature, working together with nature. And this is a pile of copper mine waste. It's 1,000 acres or more and a few 100 feet high. A number of attempts have been made to restore it using conventional methods. You can see the bulldozer there at the top. And here's some areas that have been left up to nature to heal for quite a long time, 100 years or so. And you see, that hasn't really, the nature's having its troubles here without help. It needs to have some workers, some partners. And partner Terry Wheeler, he offered to apply the plant animal mutualism that he believes sustains natural grasslands, and had learned about it from Savory and by watching the land around him. And here is the first time that the cows were put down on the side of those tailings. You can see they're sinking in almost to their chests and bellies, chasing that little bit of hay down over there. And so an offer accepted. He applied seeds and hay plus what he called flosbees, four-legged organic soil builders, to stomp in and fertilize the mix. And he believed that nature creates and sustains grasslands with herds kept moving by predators, including humans. So he kept his flosbees in herds, and here we can see them in the herd with a fence, and moved them regularly, like nature. And here's the results after flosbees. This is not, I don't think it's more than 1 year, but not all that long, actually. And I'm sure there were results in years, but I just do not have a photo to prove that. We're going to see a slightly older photo here in a second. Here's another. You can see the unrestored land in the background. There are tailings and mine waste, and a more picture of the restored areas. And here the Flosby's doing a little touch up because you have to sustain it. It's a sustainable thing. You have to keep putting them back. When Terry Wheeler died, they took the cows off. I drove by and looked and saw how it was beginning to erode badly again. I called them up and said, "What are you doing? Why did you do that?" And they said, "Well, don't worry about it. We're going to put them back on. We figured it out. If something works, you don't stop doing it." So climate change. Well, we talk about how cows put carbon in the air. Well, and I've heard a lot of people talking about on the presentation so far today about how plants and interaction with this kind of thing, plant and animal interaction pumps carbon into the soil. Well, here's an affirmation of that. As you can see, the white tailings are brown down in at least a foot and a little more than a foot. And this is not all that long. And so as we learned that rejoining nature via regenerative agriculture is so valuable for all generations, we need to come up with a way to reward it for all it achieved. We need to come up with a way, we've been talking about that too. When are we going to start rewarding the regenerators for, instead of just paying them for producing meat, why don't we start paying them for producing stuff like this, for pumping carbon into the soil, for, sustaining biodiversity, which we're going to see an example of here. Well, luckily, people are beginning to get the idea. The word is getting around. I'm researching a presentation tomorrow for Audubon here in Sedona. And here's a conservation ranching, Audubon certified, grazed on Audubon. There's empowering consumers to make a difference in grassland conservation. Audubon has initiated a program to enable ranchers who are healing and sustaining grasslands and bird habitat to label their beef with Audubon's grazed on bird friendly land label and sell it for an extra 50 cents to $2 a pound. And so I've been researching that, and they say that so far that program includes 100 ranchers on 3 million acres around the U.S., and it's the largest regenerative grassland partnership in the U.S. is what they described it as. I mean, you may know of larger ones. I probably do. You probably do, but that's from Audubon. They're not the only ones. Here's a sustainable ranching initiative supported by the World Wildlife Fund, which is partnering with ranch communities in the northern Great Plains to protect grasslands. And they have on their magazine cover, on one of them, grasslands evolved to be grazed. And it says intact grasslands not only conserve biodiversity, but ensure cleaner streams and more carbon stored in the soil. The feeding activities of herbivores provide patches of vegetation across the landscape, which wildlife utilizes. They break dry ground, allowing water to be absorbed into the soil and return nutrients and organic matter to the soil through manure. So they are supporting it. We're beginning to make a change. We're beginning to realize that we need to feel enmeshed with nature, and it makes us feel good to be able to make good results happen, like some of the ones you've seen. Here's the Nature Conservancy involved in the same program too. Regenerative grazing lands. This is one of their covers of one of their magazines. Livestock grazing on intact working grasslands can help secure clean water, enhance habitat, address climate change, and sustain rural communities. There you go. We need to, I love living in a rural community. Here's restoring the prairie, mending the sacred hoop. This is another group supporting the Cheyenne River Sioux tribes' efforts to use grading to restore and sustain the comeback of America's magnificent grasslands and the people, culture, people, and wildlife it supports. The Quivira Coalition, well, I was around for the beginning of that organization. It's doing supporting some of the same programs too, the Carbon Ranch. So one other thing just want to mention, let's see, we've got a few minutes. I just I wanted to show you all this one. One of the things we have to also realize is doing the wrong thing. Well, we've already seen how when you end the mutual relationships in nature, you cause problems. Well, here we're going to end another mutual relationship. This is the riparian area along the Upper Verde River in 1963. It was grazed at the time. It included 80% native fish including a threatened species, the spike dace. And then there was a lawsuit that had the cattle removed in the mid 1990s, 94 to 97, in order to save the threatened spike dace. And here's what started to happen to the river. The Forest Service scientists said, wait a minute, this isn't working. We've got to stop. And they said, their bosses said, well, we can't stop because they've been sued. So they kept it up. Here is one part that they were pointing out that it was a good reason to stop it. This is private land. It continued to be grazed. And this is it in 2004 after the animals had been, after the livestock had been removed. And one thing I didn't mention is in 1997, after they removed grazing in the mid 1994, started removing it, the number of spike dace in the Upper Verde River reduced to 0. I just ran into a scientist who worked for the Forest Service back in those days. He still works for them. I said, how's the spike dace doing? He said, that's a bad topic. He said, actually, he said, now in the Upper Verde, above one of the main confluences with it that defines the Upper Verde, there are 0 native fish today. 0 native fish. And so here, this is downstream in 2005, about the same time the last photo. You begin to see one of the reasons there may, well, one of the things, the bad things that's happening to the river. There's the spike dace. It's no longer threatened. It's now an endangered species. And here's a little slice of private land still in 2016. Shared gold grazing continued. 2019, still looking pretty good. Oops. 2022. Now you're beginning to see what's happening to the private land rancher has been removed, well, because of some financial intricacies. He ended up, one of them ended up giving their share to another person who sold the land back to the Forest Service. They removed the grazing from the little slice of heaven, and here you're seeing what's happening to that. And to finish things up here, we'll go back. This is another ranch that is being threatened with a lawsuit to remove grazing. This is down in New Mexico. It's the Gila River, and it, I just called them the other day, and they said things are still going well because it is still home to one of the largest known populations of spike dace. The environmental groups that eliminated the spike dace from the Verde and were never held accountable for it. We got to start holding everybody accountable for doing bad things to nature. But it's also the home to one of the largest known population of an endangered bird, the southwestern willow flycatcher, and a threatened bird, the yellow-billed cuckoo. So we've got to learn that when something works, as they said about the mine in Globe, you don't stop doing it. So that's pretty much my presentation. Ooh, what do you think?
I love it. Very good. Very good. Well, Dan, thank you very much. What a treat to have you join this group.
Well,
Most of us.
It was a treat for me to join you too, and to listen to all the other presenters. I'm really learning a lot.
Well, great. Yeah. We love to have outside perspectives that, as we talked this morning, challenge our paradigms. I'm glad to hear that you're an environmentalist. I believe truly regenerative ranchers, we must be environmentalists, right? From the true sense of the world, not the activists. But what do you see, Dan, that the average rancher is probably the cow-calf producer. They've got some private land. They've got, at least here in the West, maybe some BLM land. They've got a cow herd. What's the most influence, the best thing that the average rancher, whatever that means, can do, I guess, to kind of turn the tide and promote what your view of what ranching actually is versus cows are bad and they're destroying the climate and they're causing global warming and all ranchers are evil. So what can the average person do when we're super busy and got plenty to do and big families to raise?
Well, one of the things, one of the ranchers that I know and relate with quite a bit and go monitoring, helping him monitor his land. We were just back down looking at the little slice of heaven the other day, is we need to get ranchers working more with these environmental groups who are now offering to help ranchers who they realize, the environmental groups realize the value of what regenerative grazing really effectively applied can do. And we need to start working just like those first meetings we had. Let's start working together, and let's start going out and there are environmental groups that are now willing to help get support for ranchers who are actually doing this well and who are willing to show how well they're doing it, like the fellow that did the ORV trail that had us come out and look and help him do it and help him put the cows on and all that stuff. So we're, we've done a lot of different things, and some are more eager to work with us and some are not, but there are opportunities. And what I'm hoping is more and more ranchers start making working with those opportunities, working with those environmental groups, and start having more field trips and showing people what they're doing and having monitoring to come out and say, look at this and look at that, as we do with the Drake exclosure, where there's absolutely nothing growing, and right across the fence, 44 degrees cooler.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
A lot of comments in there about how, a picture says 1,000 words, they're visually compelling. And so that's great. Thank you, Dan, for being willing to join this summit, for your well thought out presentation. Margot put in the chat the gift page. And so you can go there, and it was for the first 3 people that jump on, they get a copy of your book. Was that right?
That's the first 3
Okay.
copies of the book.
Well, very
And the
good.
book is available. The book is available through Amazon and University of Nevada Press,
Okay.
which, just got an article in Range Magazine that got a second best environmental reporting award from Nevada.
Nice. Nice. Very good. Okay. Yep. Margot just put that in there. And definitely, to take advantage of that offer. What a great opportunity to connect with Dan and be able to read his work. So thanks again, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thank you very
Everybody,
much.
we have